At 14, Derrick Holmes stood on a Denver auction block in 1882 and bought a death trap house for $5, the price of bread. 3 months later, a railway baron offered him $10,000 to walk away. What the boy found buried beneath the floorboards would spark a war that changed Colorado forever. Of course, the boy said no.
Hello, I wish you a wonderful, amazing 2026. If you enjoy old Western stories, then you're in the right place. Tell me where you're watching from, comment, and share these videos with friends and families. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel, too. My team and I have something wonderful and free for you once we hit the 1,000 subscriber mark. We will share it in the community. You know, we go to great lengths to craft these stories, so your support means a lot to us. Join us and be a part of what we are building.
Before we dive into Derrick's story, let me tell you about something most people don't know. The orphan trains were real, and they were one of America's largest child migration movements. Between 1854 and 1929, over 250,000 orphaned, abandoned, and homeless children were placed on trains from crowded eastern cities like New York and Boston and sent west to find new families. The idea sounds noble, give kids a fresh start, but the reality was harsh. These children were often displayed on train station platforms like livestock at an auction. Families could pick whichever child they wanted, and the reasons weren't always kind. Some wanted farm labor, some wanted servants. Very few wanted teenagers like Derrick, because teenagers were seen as too old to mold and too expensive to feed. Children were separated from siblings. Many never saw their birth families again. And when you turned 18, if you hadn't been adopted, you were on your own. No support system, no safety net, just a ticket to wherever the train was headed and whatever money the orphanage could spare. This was Derrick Holmes' reality in 1882. No family, no future, just $5 and a condemned house that everyone said would kill him. But sometimes, the things nobody wants turn out to be exactly what you need.
The orphan train pulled into Denver's Union Station on a September morning in 1882, belching steam and coal smoke into air that already tasted of dust and regret. I was 14 years old, and everything I owned in the world was in my pockets. A penny, a bent nail, and my father's pocket watch, the silver case worn smooth from his thumb rubbing it during his last fever. The conductor, a man with a mustache like a push broom, looked at me the way you'd look at a stray dog, not with cruelty, just indifference. He shoved a crumpled paper into my hand. "Property auction today, boy. Condemned buildings going for cheap. Maybe you'll get lucky." He laughed, a sound like gravel in a tin can. I stood on that platform watching families claim the younger children, the cute ones, the ones who still looked hopeful. Nobody wanted a 14-year-old. We were too old to mold, too young to work legally, too expensive to feed. I was invisible. The paper in my hand advertised an auction at 2 o'clock. Lot 17, 5 Points District. Minimum bid $5. I had exactly $5, money the orphanage matron in Missouri had pressed into my palm before I boarded. For food, she'd said, make it last. 5 Points was a 30-minute walk through streets that got narrower and meaner with every block. The house stood at the end of a row of similarly broken buildings, but this one was special. It was leaning. Actually leaning to one side like a drunk trying to remember which way was up. A small crowd had gathered, men in work clothes, a few speculators in suits. The auctioneer climbed onto a crate. "Lot 17, he barked. "As is, where is? Starting bid $50. Silence. $20? More silence. Someone laughed. $5 then. Do I hear $5 for this fine property? I raised my hand.
The auctioneer's gavel came down like a gunshot. Sold to the boy for $5. He said it like a punchline. The crowd dispersed, still chuckling. One man clapped me on the shoulder, his breath reeking of whiskey. Hope you got a coffin picked out, son. That house'll be your grave by winter. I paid my $5 and received a deed that felt like a joke written on official paper. The door hung crooked on its hinges. Inside, the smell hit me first. Rot, mildew, and something else. Abandonment has a smell, turns out. Like hope went somewhere to die. That first night, I slept in the only corner where the floor felt solid, wrapped in old newspapers I'd found in a crate. The wind howled through gaps in the walls. Every creak sounded like the house deciding whether to collapse. I held my father's watch and read the inscription by moonlight. Build what others won't. Own what they can't take. Morning came with rain dripping through the roof in 7 different places. I was using my shoes as buckets when I heard a knock. A man stood in the doorway, broad-shouldered with a thick German accent. Otto Fischer, the blacksmith from next door. "You are alive," he said, like he genuinely expected otherwise. He handed me a tin cup of coffee and half a loaf of bread. "This house, bad history. Railwayman died here 20 years ago. Nobody touched it since." "What happened to him?" Otto shrugged. "Nobody knows. He just disappeared. They find house empty." For 2 weeks I worked. I scavenged lumber from abandoned buildings. I learned to patch holes by watching Otto repair his forge. My hands blistered, bled, then hardened. Then on a Tuesday morning, while reinforcing the sagging floor in the back room, the boards gave way beneath me. I fell into darkness. I hit the ground hard, 8 feet down, the air knocked from my lungs. For a moment, I just lay there in the darkness, certain I'd broken something. Then I heard it, the hollow echo. This wasn't a crawl space. This was something else. I struck a match. The flame revealed brick walls, arched and deliberate. A tunnel. Railway ties on the ground, rusted iron tracks disappearing into shadow. Denver Pacific Railway markings stamped on support beams. I followed the tunnel, lighting matches until my fingers burned. 30 feet in, I found him, the railway man Otto mentioned. What was left of him? A skeleton slumped against the wall, still wearing the rotted remains of a uniform, bony fingers clutched around a leather courier bag. Inside that bag were thousands of uncut sapphires glittering in my matchlight like captured stars. I took 1 stone to a jeweler on Larimer Street, just one, to confirm what I hoped. The jeweler's eyes went wide. "Where did you get this?" "Found it," I said. That was my mistake. Word spreads in a town like Denver. Within 2 days, everyone in 5 Points knew the orphan boy had found something valuable. Within a week, Cornelius Driscoll knew. He arrived in a carriage that cost more than my entire neighborhood. 3 men with guns flanked him. Driscoll was tall, silver-haired, the kind of man who expected the world to move when he walked through it. "Son," he said, his voice smooth as oil, "I'm prepared to offer you $10,000 for your property. That's more money than a boy like you could see in 10 lifetimes." $10,000? I could live like a king. I could disappear. I could be safe. I looked at my father's watch. "I'm not selling what I don't understand yet, sir." His face hardened. "Boy, I've buried men for less than what you're sitting on. If you've ever had to stand up to someone who thought you were nothing, hit that subscribe button. This story gets worse before it gets better."
That night, someone threw a brick through my window. A note was tied to it with twine. Sell or burn. I sat on the floor surrounded by broken glass, that note in my trembling hands, and for the first time since the auction, I cried. Not because I was scared, though I was, but because I was 14 and alone and I didn't know what to do. The knock came at dawn. A man stood in the doorway, older, with one empty sleeve pinned to his coat. "Name's Samuel Boone," he said. "I'm a lawyer. Not a very good one, but I'm cheap and I'm mean when I need to be." He stepped inside without invitation. "I heard what you told Driscoll. That took spine. You're gonna need legal help, son." "I don't have money for a lawyer." "Then we'll call it an investment. You win, I get 10%. He smiled. "I like your odds better than Driscoll thinks." Samuel brought books, property law, territorial statutes, mining rights precedents. We read by candlelight, my head aching from legal language that felt designed to confuse. But slowly, a picture emerged. The tunnel system had been officially abandoned in 1863, sealed and forgotten in railway company records. Anything found in abandoned spaces on legally owned property fell under territorial found treasure law. The sapphires weren't Driscoll's, they were mine. Otto spread word through 5 Points. The immigrant workers remembered being pushed around by men like Driscoll. Germans, Irish, Chinese railroad laborers, freed slaves. They'd all been told they were nothing. "We stand with the boy," Otto announced at his forge, and 30 men nodded. But I knew something Samuel didn't want to admit. Driscoll wouldn't fight fair. The law was just words on paper. Power was what mattered. And I had none. The territorial building inspector arrived on a Monday with a clipboard and a smirk that told me everything I needed to know. He walked around my house for exactly 4 minutes, didn't look at the reinforcements I'd made, didn't test the new supports. "Structurally unsound," he declared, writing on his form. "Public hazard. You have 72 hours to vacate before forced demolition." Samuel filed an emergency injunction, but we both knew it would take weeks to get a hearing. Driscoll wasn't waiting for courts. They came on the 3rd day, a demolition crew with a wagon full of sledgehammers and pry bars, 6 of Driscoll's men with guns on their hips, not drawn but visible. A crowd gathered to watch the orphan boy get crushed. Then Otto Fisher walked out of his shop. He was carrying his forge hammer in one hand and an old army rifle in the other. He climbed onto my porch and stood there, a wall of muscle and German stubbornness. "This boy bought this house legal," Otto said, his accent thick but his meaning clear. "You want it, you go through me first." Behind him, men started appearing. August Meyer, the baker, Chen Wu from the laundry, Patrick O'Brien and his 3 sons, Moses Freeman, who'd been born a slave and survived worse than Driscoll. 30 men, maybe more, forming a human barrier around my property. I stepped out onto the porch, my legs shaking. "I'm not leaving. This is my property. If you tear it down, you're breaking the law." The foreman of the demolition crew looked nervous. One of Driscoll's men put his hand near his gun. Then the territorial sheriff rode up. He looked at the crowd, at the tension, at how close everything was to exploding. "Stand down," he told the demolition crew. "Let the court settle it." 3 days later, the summons arrived. The territorial courthouse smelled of tobacco and old wood. I sat at a table that was too big for me, wearing a suit Otto's wife had altered to fit my frame. Across the aisle, Cornelius Driscoll sat with 3 lawyers in suits that cost more than my house. Judge Morrison entered, a gray-haired man with hard eyes and a limp from Gettysburg. Samuel had told me Morrison hated Eastern robber barons, but that didn't mean he'd side with a 14-year-old orphan. Driscoll's lead attorney stood. "Your Honor, the plaintiff is a minor with no legal guardian, no means of support, and no capacity to own property. Furthermore, the structure in question is a public hazard, and any materials found in historical railway tunnels belong to the Denver Pacific Railway Company by right of original construction." Samuel countered with the survey maps, the abandonment records, the deed from the legal public auction. His voice was steady, a former soldier arguing a battle he knew how to win. Then Driscoll's lawyer called me to the stand. "Mr. Holmes," he said, my last name sounding like an insult in his mouth, "do you have any business experience, any education in property management?" "No, sir." "Any idea how to assess structural integrity, manage finances, navigate legal contracts?" "I know how to keep a roof from falling," I said quietly. "I know the difference between what's mine and what's stolen. That's more than some men learn in a lifetime." The courtroom went silent. Judge Morrison leaned back. "I'm ruling in favor of Mr. Holmes on the ownership question. However," he looked at me, "you have 30 days to secure a legal guardian and prove financial stability, where this property reverts to territorial control." 30 days to prove I deserved what I'd fought for. If you're rooting for the underdog, if you've ever had to prove you belonged, subscribe. What happens next will surprise you. Samuel Boone became my legal guardian that afternoon. The judge signed the papers in his chambers, and just like that, I had something I hadn't had in 3 years. Family. Or the legal version of it anyway. But guardianship wasn't enough. We had 30 days to prove financial stability, and the sapphires were worthless as long as they sat hidden in my tunnel. No legitimate buyer would touch them without clear provenance. We were stuck. "Then we don't sell them," I said. "We make Driscoll our partner." Samuel looked at me like I'd lost my mind. "The man tried to steal your property." "And he failed. Now we offer him something better than theft, profit." We drafted a proposal, mining rights to the entire tunnel system, 60% of all sapphire profits to Driscoll's company. I keep the property and 40%. Samuel added clauses about operational transparency, regular audits, and a requirement that all mining employ local workers at fair wages. "He'll laugh us out of his office," Samuel said. "Maybe, or maybe he'll do the math." We requested a meeting. Driscoll made us wait 2 hours in his office lobby, a power play. When we finally sat across from him, Samuel slid the proposal across his massive oak desk. He read it in silence, his jaw tightened. "You're dictating terms to me, an orphan boy with a collapsing house? I'm offering you a legal path to a fortune," I said. "The alternative is years of court battles. Your choice." His accountant ran the numbers. The tunnel system could connect to active mining operations. The profit potential was staggering. Fighting me would cost more than partnering with me. Driscoll looked at me with something I hadn't seen before: respect. "I want audits, full transparency, and if you ever try to cheat me, boy, I'll bury you." I extended my hand. "That works both ways, Mr. Driscoll." We shook. 6 months later, my house didn't look like the same building. Professional carpenters worked alongside me, men Driscoll's company hired as part of our agreement. The foundation was reinforced with new concrete. Walls rose straight and true. A proper roof replaced the patchwork of tar paper and hope. The sapphire mine and the tunnel produced steady profits. My 40% felt like monopoly money. Numbers on paper I couldn't quite believe were real. Samuel managed it carefully, investing most of it back into the house renovation and into a trust fund. "What's the trust for?" he asked one evening as we reviewed the accounts. "An orphanage," I said. "Colorado's first legal one. I got lucky, Samuel. Most kids on that train don't. If I have money, I'm going to give them what nobody gave us, a real home." His eyes got wet. He didn't say anything, just nodded. We named it the Holbrook Home for Orphaned Children, after James Holbrook, the murdered courier, whose hidden treasure made everything possible. I had a brass plaque made for the entry hall with his name and the dates we knew, 1835 to 1862. A man whose death gave life to something he never could have imagined. 2 years after I bought the house for $5, the Holbrook home officially opened its doors. 12 children, ages 6 to 15, walked through that entrance. They had beds with real mattresses, warm meals 3 times a day, books, a teacher we'd hired, safety. I watched a little girl, maybe 7, touch the wallpaper in the hallway like she couldn't believe it was real. She looked up at me with wide eyes. "Is this really where we live?" "It's really where you live," I said. "Nobody can take it away." She smiled, and I understood why my grandfather's watch said to build what others won't. This was why.
Spring 1884. I was 16 now, taller, my hands permanently calloused from 2 years of constant work. Samuel and I stood on the platform at Union Station, the same platform where I'd arrived clutching a piece of paper and $5. Another orphan train was pulling in, steam hissing, brakes squealing, the same sound that had marked the beginning of my story. Children filed off, scared and hollow-eyed. Families came forward to claim the young ones, the desirable ones. And there, standing alone near the back, was a boy about 14, thin, dirty, clutching a crumpled paper in his hand. I knew that paper. It was an auction notice. I walked over. He looked up at me with suspicion, the wariness of someone who'd learned that kindness usually came with conditions. I pulled a $20 gold piece from my pocket and pressed it into his palm. His eyes went wide. "There's an auction this afternoon," I said. "Lot 42. Bid on it. Whatever it costs, pay it. When you own something in this territory, they have to see you as a person, not a problem." "Why would you help me?" His voice cracked. I pulled out my father's watch and showed him the inscription. "Build what others won't. Own what they can't take." I closed his fingers around the gold. "Because someone has to break the cycle." He stared at the gold piece like it was a miracle. Maybe it was. Samuel put his hand on my shoulder as we walked away. "That's your college fund you just gave him." I smiled. Some investments pay better than others. We headed back toward the Holbrook home. Smoke curled from the chimney. Children played in the yard. The house that everyone said would kill me had become something that would outlive us all. If this story moved you, if you believe one person can change everything, subscribe. Your story matters too. Tell me in the comments about a time you chose the harder path.
If you enjoyed this latest story on life in the old Wild West, then I'm sure you will love the next one coming up. Like, share, and subscribe to our channel so you can get updates on time. Did I tell you we post new, exciting, heartwarming stories daily? Subscribe now to join us so you won't miss any new stories.